Welcome to this episode of the Lake Doctor Podcast. I'm Susie Light, and with me is
Dr. Nate Bosch. And Susie, this is our last episode of Season 2 of the Lake Doctor Podcast.
Thank you, listeners and viewers, for watching these and listening. And we encourage you, if you've got any questions or comments while you're viewing this episode, let us know. We'll respond to your comments. We're really excited about this one.
Yep.
We're going to learn about why you shouldn't mess around with snapping turtles.
Well, yeah, we'll talk about that. But also, what do you do if you come upon a turtle in a roadway? And we'll also learn a little bit about, is it good to have turtles as pets or not? And I'll confess my childhood and maybe not such a great decision that I made. But we're inviting Nate Engbrecht to the podcast. He is a herpetologist with the Division of Fish and Wildlife with the Indiana Department of Natural Resources.
That's the DNR. And, you know, we've had other DNR people, characters on our episodes.
Staff members.
And we've really learned a lot about this wonderful world that we have. This episode is going to focus on turtles.
Yep.
And boy, you want to watch it on YouTube because we've got some good show and tell, don't we?
We do.
So, like I said, make sure if you've got any questions or comments, pop them in there. We will get back with you. We are watching you watch us. That's a good thing. So if you enjoyed this episode, make sure you share it with others and
subscribe. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for tuning in. The doctor is in. Nate Engbrecht. Did I say it correctly?
You got it. You nailed it.
Okay. So Nate is with DNR, and you're joining us today to talk about one of your favorite topics. Ta-da!
Turtles.
Turtles.
Yeah, great topic.
We are so excited that you have joined us for the Lake Doctor Podcast. Tell us, you have an interesting story about a snapping alligator turtle?
Yeah, it's an alligator snapping turtle.
Okay.
This must have been 3 or 4 years ago. I get a call from a colleague up in northeast Indiana, north central Indiana, in this area here, saying that some local guy had caught this turtle that he thought was an alligator snapping turtle. And that's a very rare species in Indiana, known basically from the southwest tip of the state, way down there near the Ohio River. And I thought, it's probably just a common snapping turtle. That's typically what it ends up being. And my colleague sent me photos, and I was like, well, son of a gun, that's an alligator snapper. I couldn't believe it was an actual alligator snapping turtle. So I can't remember if it was that day or the next day. My coworker and we drove all the way up from Bloomington because I wanted to see this. They had it. They had caught it fishing, and they had it in a kiddie pool in their garage. And I was like, I got to lay eyes on this. I got to get some photos and stuff. So we drove whatever it was, 3.5 hours up to see this alligator snapping turtle, and it was the real deal. And it had the shell was amazing looking. We'll look at a common alligator or common snapping turtle shell here soon, but it was very spiky, looked like it had been carved out of wood, and it was alive. And so we took a bunch of photos. We got actually a little snip of the tail to get some genetic tissue that might be informative on perhaps where it came from.
Yeah.
And then we actually went back and released it, and it was very close. It was in the county here. It was actually close to Winona Lake in a little stream. And
so we have no indication that somebody unnaturally brought it here. You think it could have come up naturally
honestly,
that far?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty far. I mean, we don't actually have any current known populations of alligator snappers in Indiana. It's mostly been older historic records. So I think it probably, honestly, was a released pet. Okay. I was a little on the fence. I was not sure if we should even release it, but they are state endangered. And so when the anglers who caught it, they really wanted to see it go back out. So we went ahead and released it back in the wild. So as of 3 or 4 years ago, we had at least one alligator snapping turtle lurking in the waters of Kosciusko County here.
Wow.
But it was a very interesting find and a very rare thing for me to see.
How big
firsthand.
will those get, and how old do they get?
Well, so they can get very large. I mean, we're talking 2 feet, or more across from front to back of the shell.
Wow.
for a large adult alligator snapper. This one was about maybe 10 or 12 inches, so it was actually the size of one of our common snappers we have around here. So it wasn't particularly large. It did have some leeches on it, actually, so it had been in the wild, I think, for at least a little while. But it's a very unusual find, but being so far outside of that deep southern Indiana range, probably was released. We may never know.
Okay.
So, Nate, you're with the DNR and you're a herpetologist?
That's right.
What do you do? We've had other DNR folks here, but this is something interesting that you specialize in.
Yeah, I have to agree. They are very interesting animals. So I work with, as a herpetologist, I work with amphibians and reptiles. That's the study of herpetology. We sometimes call them herps informally. That's kind of like slang in my field. So if I use the word herps, we're talking about an amphibian or reptile. So I oversee the herpetology program for the DNR. We're based out of Bloomington. We have a field office down there with several biologists. But I actually cover the whole state jurisdictionally. I actually cover the whole state. So we do work in different parts of Indiana, typically more in the southern part where we're based out of. And we kind of do all things amphibians and reptiles. A lot of the work we do involves doing field surveys or research projects. We're moving into some cool conservation and recovery stuff here with some rare frogs in southern Indiana. So we have our hands in a lot of different stuff. We do different things with public outreach, like here today, consultation for construction projects if there's a rare amphibian or reptile in the area. So it's just is kind of overseeing that program for the state, and it's a dream. Honestly, it's a dream job for me. I've been wanting to do this kind of stuff. This is why I got into the environmental field, was herpetology and my passion for these animals. So it's great to be in a position to be able to work full time with them.
So we have an unusual alligator snapping turtle documented in Kosciusko County.
We did. I hesitate to say it because I don't think there's an actual population here, but it was physically here. I can testify to that. Yeah.
So Nate, Dr. Nate, we hear rumors about other kinds of things in our community.
Yes. So some examples, Churubusco, the famous turtle there, that's defies logic with how large it was.
The Beast of Busco.
Yes. More recently, a shark in Lake Tippecanoe, which I think is totally a myth. And maybe one that intrigues me the most, though, is lake sturgeon in Lake Wawasee. So our largest natural lake here in Indiana is Lake Wawasee. And back in 2018, someone sighted a lake sturgeon up next to their boat early in the season. Now, we don't have confirmation of that, a positive identification for sure, but they claim that they saw a sturgeon come up and kind of breach right next to their little John boat on the way to one of the marinas on Wawasee. And this was a fisher, and so he was familiar with different types of fish, and he said it was most certainly a sturgeon. Now, our most recent positive identification with a photograph of a lake sturgeon in Lake Wawasee was back from the 1990s. So we do know that they have lived in there. But with some of the changes to that lake over time, I'm not sure that sturgeon could survive there anymore. But it's an interesting story.
So amphibians and reptiles in our state, specifically in our county, what are other unique reptiles that live here
in this region? Yeah, here kind of in the lakes region of north central and northeast Indiana, a couple that come to my mind actually are turtles. We've got Blanding's turtles, a state endangered species. Spotted turtles are another one. They're quite rare, but those two would be in this region. That's kind of more of northern Indiana type of species. We get some other turtles in the southern part of the state, but those would be ones that are more, at this point, kind of endemic to the northern part of the state.
Okay, I got to tell a story about a spotted turtle from my childhood, okay? So growing up in Michigan, I loved critters out in nature. And so one time I was down by a pond close by my house, found a spotted turtle there. They're not endangered in Michigan, but they still weren't quite as common as like a painted turtle. And so I thought it was quite interesting. And so I commandeered the little kiddie pool from our family and put it in the backyard on a little bit of a slant so that it was half water, half sort of land, and kept that turtle. And there was enough things that were falling in the pool and stuff that the turtle was eating into the fall. And I forgot about my pet turtle, which I'm embarrassed to say at this point, but I had forgotten until one time in the winter, I was sledding down the hill behind our home, and my sled crashed into the side of this kiddie pool, and I thought, oh no, my turtle, because by this point, the water in my pool had frozen, and so I quickly chipped through the ice, found my turtles. It was still liquid water under the ice. Found my turtle down there, all sort of closed in, and I was mortified that I had killed my pet turtle. I brought it in our house into an aquarium. I still don't know why my parents let me bring this dead turtle into our home, but I did. I don't know if it was sort of a memorial to this turtle or what, but I had brought it in this aquarium. I came home from school a few days later, and the turtle was crawling around in this aquarium like no problem at all. And so I was, of course, ecstatic of the resurrection of my turtle. And then the next spring, then I was able to release the turtle back to that pond. But in that story, I'm sure there's some things that the youngster, Nate, did well or didn't do well with that pet. So Nate, explain a little bit to us, one, so intriguing how this turtle survived under solid ice, and two, some ideas maybe of is it good to take a turtle as a pet or not?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think turtles are just likable animals for most people, even if you're not into reptiles. Most people, I think, can appreciate turtles. I've been surprised at how much of a response we've gotten on our Facebook posts about turtles. But they're great in the wild. I would contend that they don't make great pets for a few different reasons. They can be pretty messy, actually, when you've got them in a tank. They're fun and cute when they're small, but they can be kind of messy and probably just more maintenance than most people realize if you have them in an aquatic tank and needing filters and water changes, and especially as they get older. They'll also outgrow their tank. Some of them, not so much spotted turtles, but something like a red-eared slider that's a bit more common in the pet trade. Those can grow pretty fast, and they can quickly become more than someone can really handle or wants to manage as a pet. And some of them live really long. I mean, they can outlive their landowners or their pet owners, and they'll decades, in the order of decades. And so it's a commitment. If you want to take on a turtle, you can. There's certain species you can legally collect in Indiana with a valid hunting or fishing license. There's different ways to do it, but I think it oftentimes is more of a commitment than people realize. And some of them are protected. Some of them are endangered. Box turtles are not endangered, but they're all protected. And so there's just several considerations if you kind of want to take the dive into keeping a turtle as a pet. But they're fascinating animals, and like we were talking about earlier, the babies are adorable. I mean, they really are. They're super cute, and it's totally understandable why someone would want to take them home.
And from what I understand in Indiana, if you take on that responsibility of a turtle in your home, there's a certain threshold that if you keep it so long, you have to then hold on to it for the remainder of its life, right?
Yeah, so the regulations that we currently have for amphibians and reptiles in Indiana says that if you collect one from the wild, whether it's a turtle or a salamander, and you keep it in captivity, after 30 days, you cannot release it back into the wild. You're actually not allowed to do that. There's, these animals can start to become tame, in captivity. And so, that's kind of how our regulations are set up right now. And so, if you want to take it in for a week, show the kids or something like that, that's a little different. But once you've had it past that 1 month threshold, it's yours. You either have to keep it or find someone else, rehome it for someone else to care for it.
And if someone were to take it into their home just for a few days, and they wanted to release it again, what would you recommend? Release it right where they found it, or?
Yeah, so that's the other thing. It has to be within 30 days. It has to go back to the point of capture where you got it. We don't want people moving them around. You could actually accidentally end up spreading diseases if that turtle's sick. You could actually, artificially spread it, and then it cannot have been held with any other animal. So you wouldn't want to put it in with your Russian tortoise, which could have some weird, reptile disease from Russia. And so there's a lot of considerations there. So you want to keep it in its own little tank by itself, a clean tank, and it would go back to the point of capture.
So not only did I not do a good thing by not taking good care of this turtle, but if I were to have grown up here in Indiana, I kept it too long to be able to then release it. And so that is quite a commitment then if someone wants to take a turtle as a pet.
Because they live a long time.
Yeah.
So is the danger that if you kept it for more than 30 days and then released it, it might starve because it was dependent on a person?
Well, yeah, I mean, if it may get used to being around, in the wild, a large mammal that approaches a turtle is usually not a good thing for the turtle. But in captivity, that's is getting fed. It's,
Yeah.
it maybe recognizing this large creature as something that would feed it. Maybe it becomes tame. It's not maybe foraging as well as it used to. And so there's some behavioral kind of considerations there when it goes. You kind of want, the idea is that if you collect it from the wild and you just want to keep it short term, you just kind of put it back where you got it, put it back pretty quickly, and it kind of is still a wild animal.
Yeah.
So while we're talking about things that we did wrong when we were kids, when I was a kid, it seemed like the thing to do when you caught a turtle was, with nail polish, paint a name on a turtle.
Oh, you didn't actually do that.
I
did you,
didn't
Susie?
do that.
Good.
I didn't do
Never.
that.
She would never do that.
I won't tell you who did. But that's dangerous to the turtle because?
Well, we don't really know, depending on what you paint it with, what kind of chemicals are in that. Would that, potentially absorb into the shell, or could that somehow affect the turtle? As a turtle shell grows, I can actually grab a shell here, this box turtle shell. As a turtle shell grows, it kind of, each section of the shell is sort of growing out. And if you put some substance on the shell that kind of like is tight or fixed, that could affect the growth development of the shell. Sometimes we see these wild photos of turtles that have, turtles or other animals that have swam into like the plastic six pack ring things, and it gets around it, and the turtle grows, but that part of the shell that's surrounded by a plastic ring or something, it gets constricted. It's almost like a fence in a tree, except in this case, the shell kind of grows around that. So any kind of thing you're putting on the shell, we have to think about, how that might actually affect the turtle and how it might affect even the growth of the shell and the health of the turtle.
So while you have that shell close to you, is there a way to tell the age of a turtle by the shell?
Sort of. That's a great question. So you can, if you looked at it up close, you could actually see each section of this turtle shell has these little growth rings. Actually, there's these little, it looks like a tree ring almost. And so I shouldn't say every year. The growth rings represent age, but they don't always represent a year. What happens with our turtles in this region is that you have this season of activity. They're coming out right now. Yep. It's April. They're starting to feed. They're growing. It's a period of growth during the warm season. And then when they hunker down in the winter, either digging underground for a box turtle or under the ice at the bottom of a lake for a lot of our aquatic turtles, everything's shutting down, everything's slowing down, there's not much growth going on. So what you end up having is that each ridge represents more or less a growing season. And around here, that's about a year, but you could have a situation where maybe the turtle gets sick, for the middle of summer, and then it kind of, everything slows down, or then it starts growing again, or maybe there's a severe drought that affects, the growth ring. So every edge or ring doesn't exactly represent a year, but it does approximate it. So you could approximate the age. I found some box turtles a week or two ago down in southern Indiana. We found 4 of them on one day, actually. And I just picked it up and I just counted. Yep, this one's got 5, so probably about 5 years old. One was about 15. So it's an estimate. It is more difficult on some turtles, like the snapping turtle, this common snapping turtle shell here. It just doesn't have growth rings. It's pretty smooth. And when they get older, those rings tend to become a little more obscure and it's hard to see them. There's no way I could age this thing. I mean, there's some really faint ones, but box turtles do have those nice little kind of growth rings.
So the box turtle shell that you have here with you, and I'd encourage, we have both listeners and viewers to our podcast. I'd encourage people to flip over maybe for YouTube for this one so they can view some of these turtle shells in front of us. That was a box turtle shell you held up first. What age would you say that box turtle was, either by what you can see for the rings or just by the size of it?
Well, I'm going to count the rings real quick here. It's going to be tough because it's kind of shellacked, but...
So that was shellacked after the turtle...
I did. After the turtle died.
After the turtle died.
I put like a shellac resin on this thing to try to preserve it and give it a coating. I mean, just a really cursory look at this, probably 15 to 20 years old for this guy.
Wow.
And this one doesn't have the bottom of the shell on. I actually have it back in my office, but it broke off. Box turtles have a hinged shell where like right across this kind of midsection here, there's a back section of the shell and the front section, and they can actually open and close it, which is super cool.
Really?
When you think about how hard these shells are, they have a little bit of, it's not like a hinge like a door hinge, but it's a more a fleshy kind of membrane that's right between the back section. I wish I'd brought the bottom of this thing where they can actually completely box themselves in. To protect from predators, as opposed to something like our local painted turtles, where everything's pretty much fixed, everything's pretty much solid. This shell is not bending, there's no fold, there's no crease, but that's a kind of a distinct feature of our box turtles.
Hence the name box turtle.
Yeah, they box themselves up.
Really?
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's the whole thing. And they're more
cool.
domed and boxy shaped too. The shells are. This is an eastern box turtle. We have an ornate box turtle in northwest Indiana. That's more of a prairie
So flip
species.
that around and show the camera because there's vertebrae in there.
Yeah, the spine. This is So this is actually be helpful too. This is what the top of a turtle shell looks like. I should say this is the bone. So on a turtle shell, you've got the bony structure, and on the inside of it, your vertebrae are fused into the shell. And then on the outside, there's this just really thin layer. It's almost like a thumbnail type of material.
Like a cuticle, maybe.
Yeah, kind of a cuticle on the outside that has all the pattern. And when the turtle dies, like if I had not shellacked this, those things would probably start flaking off, and then you end up with this. It's almost a helmet like structure there, but the vertebrae, the backbone is fused into this shell. This is absolutely a part of the turtle's body. It's not coming out like a crab might come out of a shell. They're locked in. So
the other thing is turtles are reptiles.
Correct.
So unlike mammals, they hibernate during the winter.
Well, some mammals hibernate, but all of our reptiles.
That's right.
Yeah,
Bears.
all of our reptiles.
Sorry.
That's all good. We're here to talk about turtles.
So back to that story that I was telling before about that turtle behind my house. So it obviously from the story it survived.
It did, which is remarkable.
And this is pretty common for our turtles, our aquatic turtles in this area to actually go down in the mud or under the ice. And how can they survive for several months?
It's hard to imagine. How they could survive. I mean, pretty much our aquatic turtles are going down to the bottoms of lakes and streams. And of course, around here, usually the lakes get frozen for at least part of the winter. And so they hunker down. The whole physiology, the whole system slows down. The amount of heartbeats per minute, everything gets really slow. I know with snappers, I've heard or read that they can actually take in some oxygen through. It's actually near the base of the tail. It's called the cloaca. It's kind of the all-purpose reproduction waste kind of exit hole there, but they can take in some oxygen apparently through that. But everything just slows down. And it almost is hard to believe. Even down in Bloomington where I live, we've got a little backyard pond about the size of this table, and we had a bullfrog that showed up and last summer or fall, and we had a really hard cold snap at the end of January, and that frog was down there presumably in the bottom of the pond. And this is all normal stuff that happens with, turtles and frogs like every year. And we sort of know it from a textbook standpoint, but to look out when there's a foot of snow on the ground and that thing's frozen, I'm thinking he's down there, I guess. I hope he survives. And sure enough, he came back out in the spring. And it's the same thing with our turtles. And there's even reports, sometimes you'll hear about people talking about actually seeing turtles swimming under the ice, maybe getting a little active. I don't know if that's because, it had warmed up or it refroze and the turtle kind of went back dormant again, but actually seeing them swim under the ice, and of course you just think, how can they breathe? But they pull through during winter, and slowing the whole system down is a huge part of that.
Yeah, because we know from a lot of our lake research that down near the bottom of lakes in wetlands would be the same thing. There's very little oxygen because there's bacteria that are using up oxygen down near the bottom, decomposing all of that old plant matter and muck and such. So, but they can pull a little bit of oxygen, just enough to keep those really low metabolic processes continuing to go even over the winter. That's remarkable. I know frogs in our area, like the wood frog and spring peepers, those can, the wood frog at least can freeze solid, no heartbeat, brain flatlined, but yet can thaw out in the spring and
pretty remarkable.
Start hopping around again.
There's antifreeze type of elements in there that prevents the critical things from freezing. But it's pretty remarkable how these animals, can survive. But they do it every year. And then spring comes, or even a warm winter day, and you see them out basking on a log or something.
It's really cool.
So you mentioned research that your office is doing. What kind of research are you doing that can tell us about lakes or people's health?
That's a good question. Well, we do a lot of work with amphibians, and we do reptile stuff too, but we have in the past done a lot of work with frogs, and we actually have a collaborative project with Purdue going on with these hellbender salamanders, and there's a lot of connections to water quality. Now, these hellbenders are more of an Appalachian species, so we don't have them up here. We have them further down in the very southern edge of the state.
And hellbender is a salamander?
It's a very large salamander. Yep, it's the largest. It's a fully aquatic salamander. So
it's kind of like our mud puppies.
It is.
More in the northern part
It kind of is,
Indiana.
and that's the other one I was thinking about. Yeah, that would be more local to here. But we think about water quality with these amphibians that live, they're, really even part of their lives in the water. But some of these, like a hellbender or mud puppy, they're fully aquatic like a fish, and they're in the water all the time. And so we start to think about, water quality, how it affects them. They have this very soft, permeable skin where they can take in toxins probably more easily than something like a reptile. And so, the mud puppy would be the local example of a fully aquatic salamander that is certainly in our local lakes and streams. I think we actually had some reports out of Winona Lake. So they're around. And so we're always trying to track. They're hard to study. Some of these fully aquatic salamanders are difficult to study, especially mud puppies, because they can be in the deeper parts of lakes.
Yeah.
Most of the data that we have on mud puppies in Indiana is actually from anglers that catch them. You know, a lot of times they'll catch them in the winter when they're in the shallows. You know, and so
and can be quite a surprise.
Absolutely, they're a very bizarre looking animal.
Fishing,
oh,
like,
totally.
What is this that
the
just came up from the lake?
And that's
I
the great
imagine that's
thing.
why they got the name Hellbender in southern Indiana.
Yeah, they are. They're. I have to say, but hellbenders are somewhat grotesque looking, even though they're awesome and kind of cool.
So if somebody wanted to actually see a mud puppy, I think, do you have some of those here?
Yeah, we do. We do have Mabel the mud puppy here at the Lilly Center for Lakes and Streams, right in one of our lobby aquarium.
And do you have any turtles here?
We do. We have a few turtles here at the Lilly Center. I believe we have some painters and I think a map turtle as well.
Yeah. So Nate, it's not a good idea for somebody to personally have a pet turtle because of the longevity of turtles and the care needed. Why is it okay for the Lilly Center to have a turtle?
Yeah, I mean, it's not that it's wrong to have a turtle. It's just that there's a lot of considerations, and it can be a challenge, and there's logistical challenges that come with it. For someone, so folks you here at the Lilly Center, I mean, you guys are equipped. You have tanks, you have filters, you have full-time staff that can kind of take care of these things, and you have the ability probably to upgrade to a larger tank if you have to, and it's great for education, you know. And
yeah, and that's why we have the turtles and the mud puppy, frogs, and garter snake. And we have a scientific purposes license through the Department of Natural Resources. So we had to apply for that, and we're permitted to have certain organisms here on campus and then keep those in captivity. But we're under similar rules that when we have those in captivity, we can't then just take those turtles and go put them in one of our local natural lakes, for example. We are committed to holding on to them and being able to use them for those educational purposes. So,
what are the dangers, or what are causing species to be endangered?
Yeah, it kind of depends on the species, but there can be a lot of environmental factors. The biggest one is probably habitat loss. You know, the sort of places that turtles or other reptiles and amphibians live. A lot of them have, you know, some of the wetlands have been drained. The forests have been, you know, maybe removed for agriculture. So with turtles, one of the bigger challenges is actually nest predation. A lot of their nests get dug up and eaten by things like raccoons and skunks. That's a big challenge. Like, you could have 80 to 90% of an endangered turtle's nest get destroyed in a given year.
Now, would that be natural or is that unnatural? Like, do we have more raccoons and skunks now than there would have been 200 years ago that are kind of over predating our turtles?
That's a great question. I think the answer is, at least with raccoons, probably yes.
Okay.
We don't really have top-level carnivore predators like wolves or mountain lions that might, you know, actually eat some of these mid-sized carnivores like raccoons or skunks. I don't actually know. I can't fully answer that question because I'm not really a mammalogist, but it does seem like, especially with raccoons, they are very persistent. They can live in cities in the country, and they just really have a knack for finding turtle nests. So if those
we don't have hunters out there hunting.
Yeah, they're not as popular as a
either.
hunting. Yeah, raccoon hunting I don't think is as popular as it once was. So nest predation, habitat loss is another one. We talked earlier about lake edges. You know, the natural edges of lakes being converted more to kind of the seawall style or big rock banks, where it's harder for turtles to even maybe get out to nest.
Let's talk about that. So historically, our lakes would have been bordered by wetlands, which we've talked a lot about on the podcast, or if not a wetland, at least native plants that sort of have a gradual incline then up into a forested community. We'd call that sort of a riparian forest. Whereas now, when you have a very high slope or completely sort of perpendicular concrete face.
Almost vertical.
Yeah, almost vertical. A turtle is not able to climb up to bask in the sun or to get out to nesting activities and those sort of things. And so we call it kind of a bathtub sort of an idea, both with waves bouncing from shore to shore on our lakes, but also if you imagine a turtle trying to get up on the side of a bathtub would be difficult as well. So a bathtub effect is appropriate for that as well. We also have in some of our streams because some of our streams have been channelized, and some of our streams are so flashy now with really high flooding and then lower droughts because of how we've oriented a lot of the water towards our streams with lack of wetlands and those sort of things. Our streams now have much steeper banks than they once did as well. And so turtles really are at a disadvantage now compared to historically with being able to move from the aquatic into the terrestrial environment and have that connection that's natural for them.
A lot of our amphibians and reptiles live at that interface, or they move between land and water, and with turtles, hanging out in shallows, basking on, natural vegetation. But like you said, the artificial shoreline has those negative impacts on them.
You mentioned animals that raid nests.
Yeah.
What about people? What kind of impact are people having on turtles?
Yeah, that's another great question. I mean, there is definitely an active turtle pet trade, and I've seen reports and been in at least a meeting or two about the pet trade of turtles going to China, a lot of them being shipped to China. So box turtles are pretty vulnerable. Spotted turtles, the ones that are more attractive and appealing, probably a little bit of the smaller ones, sometimes maybe more vulnerable because people can ship them easily or have them in a tank. But yeah, the pet trade has definitely been a problem. And I don't know, how much of that has impacted our local populations up here. Probably historically, yeah, species like spotted turtles, they're real gems. I mean, they're cute little turtles. They don't get big. Probably easy to collect. They're so rare now, most people don't even find them really, and we're careful about sharing that information about where the populations are still hanging on. But that is a problem. That is an actual threat to turtle populations, really, honestly, globally.
So if I'm driving and I see a turtle in the road, what should I do and what should I not do?
Yeah, so the best practice, if you can safely get out of your car, I have to put that caveat on there.
Yes,
I don't want to get
that's
sued.
good.
No, if you can safely get out of your car, to move the turtle in the direction it is going. You don't want to turn it around, let it go. It's on a mission. It's going somewhere, and it probably knows more about where it's going than you would expect. And so move it across the road so that it can continue on its journey. It's tricky when you're on a busy highway. You have to kind of make a very quick, calculated decision. Am I going to try to move this thing? But that would be the best practice, would be to move it in the direction it's going.
Now, what about if it's a snapping turtle? Is there?
Boy,
I've tried picking those up before. Is there
the blanket in your car?
So you got a shovel, big shovel, yeah.
Yeah, I've used a green scoop shovel before.
Do you? Yeah,
because you can kind of help get it up underneath there and then move it in that way so it's far away from any of my limbs. So
I'm glad you brought that up because they're feisty. I mean, they're very defensive. You got to make another judgment call. I mean, they'll turn around and face you. They'll face off with you in a defensive thing. So it can be tricky. It might not be in your best interest to try and move a snapping turtle unless you know how to handle it.
Okay.
It's tempting to want to grab it by the tail. The tail does make for a good handle, but when you lift that snapping turtle up, there's a lot of weight, and you can. I hate to admit this, but when I was younger, I did that, and you could feel the vertebrae popping because the tail's an extension of the spine.
It's not made to have all of its weight.
They get so heavy, to grab by the tail is bad. The technique I've used, and it's helpful to have gloves, is to actually grab it above the back legs like that, where you're kind of outside of the striking distance of the head. I'm not saying this is a technique people should always use, but that's the technique I like to use, is try to get it with the back of the shell there. Now, if it's a real big one, that might even be too much weight still, and they'll scratch you with their hind legs.
So gloves.
Gloves are super helpful, like the leather gloves would be helpful, but it may be that from a human safety standpoint, it's actually not worth doing it unless you're in a situation where maybe it's a country road and it's not busy and you have the right equipment.
Right.
But I always try to avoid the business end and go for the back of the shell if I'm going to grab them. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like, hey, little guy or little gal, I'm trying to help you out here. Work with me on this.
And it's tough for the turtles that are more docile, like a box turtle or even a painted turtle. If they're crossing the road, a turtle's natural defense when it's scared is to pull in the shell. Yeah. But that's about the last thing you want to do on a road because they'll be crushed.
Right.
The best thing they could do is just sprint, by turtle standards at least. Sprint across if you can, but that natural defensive posture to pull in is actually super detrimental on a road.
Interesting.
They're just not adapted for a modern landscape like that.
Now, the eastern box turtle is mostly terrestrial, right?
Yep, that's correct.
We've got a beautiful campus here at Grace College with some forested, some upland, lowland forests, as well as some wetland areas. And we've seen eastern box turtle here on campus, which is really amazing, in some of our restored natural areas.
Wow.
Do they have any portion of their life in an aquatic environment, or do they always stay kind of in an upland area?
They're pretty much always on land. They're almost like our version of a tortoise. I mean, they will occasionally crawl into a lake. I've heard of people kayaking, seen one swimming across a lake. They're a little bit out of their element. Sometimes in like late summer, if it's real hot, they'll get into like little pools of water. Like maybe if you have a stream that's partially dried up and there's some small pools, they'll sometimes congregate in those to maybe hydrate or cool off. But it's not like, our painted or map turtles where you actually, that is their home, is in the lake. These guys are basically on land. Probably, I mean, if I had to estimate, 98% of their life on land.
So are they technically then a tortoise rather than a turtle?
They're turtles still, but they're just a terrestrial turtle.
So what's the difference then between a tortoise and a turtle?
That's probably, it's a tough one. I actually couldn't tell you the diagnostic difference. I think it has more to do with scientific classification and kind of who's lumped into which groups or whatever. So, tortoises, of course, are land dwellers, but these guys would be considered a land-dwelling turtle.
Okay, so tortoise means for sure land.
Well,
turtle could be land or water.
You're describing their behavior, but I think it probably has more to do with scientific classification. And behavior maybe follows that.
Okay, all right.
Well, speaking of turtles and land, what do I do if I see a turtle on my property, like in my yard?
In your yard, I would say let it be. There's a decent chance especially as we get into May and June, it's out there trying to nest and lay its eggs. It's crawled out. Again, you might think it's lost. Well, don't be so sure. It may be getting ready to nest. And so, like I said, May, June, first half of July, maybe you're going to get turtles coming on land, dig a little hole, excavate the little hole with their back legs, drop the eggs in, and then bury it and go back into the pond or with the box turtle just back in maybe a different part of the woods. So I would just let it be. Now, if it's getting into, the driveway, or if it's getting into a place where it's actually at risk, you might just move it back kind of into the yard again. But it's probably on a mission to do something that it wants to do. It could be
move it in the direction it's going, right?
Well, if it's in the yard, you could move it the direction it's going, or just let it move on its own in that sense. But on the road, certainly. Yeah.
Now, is there a way, you talked about nest predation is really bad, especially for some of ours that are threatened and endangered.
Yeah.
If someone were to see a nesting location of one of those species that's threatened or endangered, is there any way to kind of protect that nest from predators to kind of help that turtle out then for reproduction?
Yeah. There are ways to protect a nest, and you can do it. It's legal to do it as far as I know. And what you would want is some kind of cage that is, not a bucket, but something that has an open top so it can get the natural sunlight, natural rainfall. You want it to kind of be about as natural as you can. And some kind of probably heavy-duty wire cage, something that could withstand a raccoon trying to rip it, and anchoring that thing down with big stakes. It would be ideal if you could have a little gap on the bottom so that when they hatch, they can get out and crawl out naturally. Otherwise, you're going to probably need to check it like every day. Now, it'll take those turtles probably 3 or 4 months to hatch. But that is an approach that people have used to protect turtle nests, especially if it's on a lake where there's a known nesting area, like a beach where lots of turtles nest. A friend of mine, Adam Theta, who's over at Lake Maxinkuckee, he's been working with some of the locals over there to actually create turtle nest boxes to protect them. And they're constructing them and they're deploying them in areas where they know that they have had nesting and where they can kind of see evidence that something just nested. So it's a legit thing, but you just want to make sure you're kind of doing it the right way.
Right.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
My mom has had a turtle nesting into her landscape for the last couple of years. And it was fascinating because, they didn't just dig a hole and lay the eggs. It was they dug a hole and then the next day came back and dug more.
Oh, interesting. Huh.
And it was pretty big.
Maybe a snapping turtle, could be a big map turtle.
Okay.
Yeah.
We never got to see the turtle. But, then it'd be covered up. So, okay, we got eggs in there.
But pretty much all of our aquatic turtles around here that are in our lakes and streams are going to have the same sort of thing where they're coming on land, dropping hard-shelled eggs. I mean, not as hard as a chicken egg, but maybe ping pong ball size down into the nest, and it can vary from maybe a half dozen eggs to 40 or more eggs, depending on the species and the size of the turtle.
So once eggs hatch and the little turtles come out, do those little turtles have predators?
Oh, yeah. They're highly vulnerable to really any kind of animal that could fit them in their mouth. The birds or, any of the mammals, the predatory mammal type of things like raccoons or squirrels. Not squirrels, raccoons or skunks. Squirrels probably wouldn't mess with them. I suppose probably even a predatory snake, if they could find them, because they're just so small. And the shell doesn't really offer them much protection at that point. It's still fairly soft. It hasn't really fully hardened, and that might take a while. And so, they're pretty vulnerable at that size.
So we estimated that box turtle shell was...
I think we said 15 to 20 was a rough...
So when that egg first hatches, How big is that box turtle?
Oh, when they come out, the box turtle would probably be, it would maybe be $50 size. Yeah, it's going to be really small. Pretty much all of our local species are very small. I would say no more than about a silver dollar, probably $50. Musk turtles are really small. They're very cute when they come out. Musk turtles are pretty small as adults. They're not real big. But when they come out, they almost look like an acorn. I've seen them in the shallows, kind of hanging out in the algae areas, kind of scooping with a net, and they're very small when they come out. And so, yeah, easy prey for a lot of carnivorous animals.
Do fish eat turtles?
A bass would probably take a baby turtle, no problem. Yeah.
Bass eat anything that fits into their mouth.
Yeah, I'm sure some of the larger fish would. Yeah, if they saw it swimming in the open, it's to the baby's turtle benefit to hang out in the vegetated shallows. Yeah.
In addition to the turtle shells that you brought to show today, I love show and tell.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about the resource books that you brought.
Yep. So I've got a few books that I brought here that might be helpful for some of our listeners and viewers. This little booklet, Turtles of Indiana, was published by Purdue University as part of their Purdue Extension, and I think you can actually order it on their website. It's just a nice little booklet. It's not very much. It's probably between $10 and $15, and it just talks about the different species in Indiana. It's got some different identification tips, and I believe it has some distribution maps, and so it can be just a helpful resource for folks to have on hand. Not real expensive. If you want to take a deeper dive, if you feel like you're starting to become obsessed with herpetology like me, you might want to check out The Amphibians and Reptiles of Indiana. It's by Sherman Minton Jr. He passed away several years ago, but this is sort of the book. People refer to this as the Bible of amphibians and reptiles for Indiana, and this is actually sold by the Indiana Academy of Science. They have it on their website, and so you can order it. It'll be cheaper if you order it there. And this is a great book. It's a little bit outdated because it's about 25 years old, but this has a lot of detailed information, detailed maps. That's an ornate box turtle. This has a lot of great information, and this is the book I have on my desk that I reference frequently, actually.
How many different turtles do we have in Indiana? That would be in
let's count them.
Those books.
I don't have. I'll be honest with you. I don't know the number offhand.
Well,
I want to say between 10 and 15 ballpark. Yeah.
Okay.
So up here, actually the highest diversity would be down in the southwestern region.
Okay.
You're getting some of those southern species that just barely come up into Indiana.
Yep.
They come up the Wabash or up the White River system. So we have 3 different types of map turtles down there. We're up here, we just have one, a northern map turtle. And river cooter is a rare species down south. So that's got more diversity in general, the southern part of the state. But in the southwest region, that's the highest diversity of turtles in the state. But when you come up here, like I said, you get into spotted and Blanding's turtles that we don't see down there. So we've got our northern stuff up here too.
Okay.
So why is it called a map? MAP.
MAP, yeah. If you actually get a map turtle, and I don't have a shell here, but if you get one in hand, the back of the shell has a lot of them have the males especially have this nice ridge. It comes to kind of a prominent ridge when they're young. But the texture of the shell, it looks like a topographic map. There's these lines that actually
really
look
cool.
like, and the scientific name is cool. It's Graptimys geographica is the actual name. And it gets even better because the false map turtles is Graptimys pseudo geographica. Literally false map. So, it's that pattern on the shell. Pretty good description, actually. And they're a very common species I found in our lakes up here. Yeah.
Okay, this is like asking what your favorite child is, but what is your favorite turtle?
Ooh, that's a good question. Favorite turtle, I'll say for Indiana. Oh man, I was actually, for all the questions you asked, I was not prepared for this one. I would probably go with a spotted turtle. I like them. They're very small. They're very. This is a non-technical term. They're very cute, and they actually occupy. They tend to occupy like shallow marshes. I've seen them actually in the dune and swale region along Lake Michigan. Shallow swales. They'll be in bogs and fens. They seem to use higher quality habitats, and so we have them as some of our nature preserves. But they're darlings of the Midwestern turtle world. They really are.
Well, and with using those higher quality habitats, those habitats are most in decline in the Midwestern United States. And so it makes sense why those spotted turtles, I think they're state endangered for Indiana, right?
Yeah, and we see that with like our switching taxonomic groups here, but our Massasauga rattlesnakes, they're very rare in Indiana, probably rarer than spotted turtles. We tend to find them in some of the high-quality natural areas that are still remaining, and a lot of them are protected and not really cool. I mean, maybe it's coincidentally. You sometimes find spotted turtles and Massasaugas together. They're occupying similar habitats and they're high-quality.
And that's another reason why it's important, the work that the DNR does, the Lilly Center for Lakes and Streams, some of our other partners, and part of the reason of why we're moving forward with this Lake RX project, right, where we're developing prescriptions for our lakes. And one of those solutions that we're promoting is wetlands, both restoring existing wetlands as well as creating new wetlands, because we've lost so many of those high-quality wetlands in the state of Indiana and really throughout the Midwest. If we can recreate and restore wetlands back to that high-quality state, we can then start to allow some of these really cool critters to make a comeback as well, which we're really excited about, while making our lakes cleaner for the residents and communities around our lakes at the same time. So a true win-win.
True win-win.
Yeah.
DNR Nate mentioned fens and bogs and places where you can see these turtles, and we have those here.
Yeah, you're right. We've got bogs here, which are where we have rainwater, which moves into an isolated area, and over time we can start to have a bog. We have fens here, where you have groundwater that's creating those wetlands. We have marshes, we have swamps, so we have all of these different types of wetlands.
And we've got a lot of people visiting those locales. So DNR Nate, what should I do if I see one of these species that's maybe endangered?
Yeah, so we're always interested in endangered species sightings, and I'm particularly interested in turtles and other reptiles and amphibians. So if you see a turtle, and this is a good time of year when the air can sometimes still be cold, the water's cold, but the sun's out and they're warming up, basking on a log, if you get a pretty good photo of a rare species like a Blanding's turtle or a spotted turtle, please do send it over to us. Consider submitting that record, and because we'd love to add it to our heritage database. That's where we kind of house all of our rare species records. That's actually very useful information for helping us to understand where these rare turtles are still hanging on. That's the first step in conservation, is knowing what you have, knowing where it's at, and then you can start to move forward with trying to conserve it, or maybe even studying the population to learn more about it. So the email, if you want it, for where these guys can send stuff to, it's herpsurveys@dnr.in.gov. HERP for herpetology, surveys, SURVEYS, at dnr.in.gov. That's my public reporting email if people want to send photos to that, and the information about where they found it and what date. That is super helpful, and we'd love to fold that information into our data sets.
I'm going to start a club called the Turtle Hunters of Kosciusko County.
There you go.
We'll send you information.
Send us the data. We love it.
That's great.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Nate. We're really glad that you brought things to show us. So make sure you turn into the YouTube channel so you can see them. And this is our last episode of season 2. I think we saved one of the best for last.
Yeah, this is pretty good.
Yes, but make sure that you stay tuned. Check us out for season 3. And we're glad you were here for the Lake Doctor podcast. The doctor is in.